consulting services. He will be in charge of coordinating this panel. And we have friends, Mr. Alfredo Cabelli, and other colleagues who are going to be with us. Uh, See, you don't have to read their resumes. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. I cordially invite you all to please start.
Y pues, Olga, Adrián, un placer.
All welcome, Olga. It is a pleasure to share this event with you. Today we will have the participation of colleagues, very distinguished colleagues. Ming Yang, she is a professor of communication studies at the North Carolina University at Charlotte, in Charlotte. She is a member of the Minister of the Chinese Conference on Internet Research and a director for the global project of media concentration on Internet. We also have Dr. Cynthia Solis. She is a member of the consultative, the Federal Institute of Telecommunications. She is a lawyer. She has a PhD in law in Paris, Lex Informatica. Likewise, she with us. We have Dr. Luca Belli. He coordinates the Technology Center he comes from Brazil. He is one of the very authors on digital sovereignty. And to close this presentation, we have our loved friend, Dr. Alfredo Reyes Crat. He has a PhD in law from the Iberoamericana University. He is a lawyer from UPE. He has been 3 times. He has been the chair of the Internet Association, MX, and he is also a point of reference in Mexico. He is the teacher of teachers, professor of professors. It is my pleasure. Welcome. And it is so nice to have you all here. We were going to start, if it's okay with you. We were going to start with the ladies, but I know you have a tight agenda. Luca, you have a tight agenda, so if it's okay with you, Luca, I kindly ask you to please if would you please start with your presentation, and would you please share with us a little bit about the general aspects of digital sovereignty, what we need to understand by this concept. This is the first point, and likewise the interaction that this topic has with all those topics related to internet governance. I apologize for not starting with ladies first. In fact, this panel is enriched by the participation of presenters, very prestigious presenters, and we wanted to have brilliant, outstanding women to enrich this panel. Luca, welcome. Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks so much for the invitation, specifically Adrian, and Olga. I will be making my presentation in English, and this is to facilitate the life of translators, so that my Spanish is basically a mix of Italian and Portuguese. So it is going to be easier for me, for people to understand this presentation in English and to then translate. I perfectly understand Spanish, but we're going to be speaking about data sovereignty and digital sovereignty, so it is easier for me to do it in English. I also apologize because I need to leave early because I need to pick up my children in an hour. I need to go and pick them up. Bien.
Yes. I think now you can see it. So my presentation is the aim is to connect the overall theme of this session, digital sovereignty, with something a little bit more focused that has a direct connection with internet governance issues, which is data governance, and especially what we end up calling data sovereignty. And how this connects with the study, the research that I've been developing over the past years, and part of which I had the pleasure to develop in partnership with my good friend, Professor Min Jiang, that is today with us, and I'm sure we'll discuss in the next part of the session. So the first question is why the BRICS grouping, which is one of the grouping I do most research about, has been starting discussing digital sovereignty or cybersecurity or digital issues at all, because for those like me or like Min that deal with BRICS since several years, this might be obvious, but for most people that are not interested in this increasingly important grouping, the BRICS grouping, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, plus the new members of that have joined over the past year and a half, Ethiopia, Egypt, Indonesia, Iran, Saudi Arabia, and the Arab Emirates. So why it is relevant for them to discuss data sovereignty and data governance? Well, you have in front of you the reply to this question. This gentleman, Mr. Edward Snowden, 11 years ago revealed a massive scheme of global surveillance, and that was the kickstart of the BRICS interest in cybersecurity and data governance issues. And the first time that the BRICS grouping included a mention to cybersecurity was in this declaration 11 years ago, just some weeks after the Snowden revelations. The Itaquini declaration adopted in Durban, South Africa, where they emphasized the relevance of working towards a universally accepted norms and standards for cybersecurity. This is something that we have analyzed in this book. It's one of the first research outcome of our Cyber BRICS project, which is a flagship project of the center I direct here at FGV. And we have been mapping digital policies of the BRICS over the past 6 years. This was our first joint venture with Min. She authored the part on China. The conclusion of this book was precisely that BRICS countries were going to build their own digital sovereignty some way. And we end up understanding there was an overlap between cybersecurity and and digital sovereignty in the part that concerns control. Understanding the technology, the vulnerability of the technology, and developing tools, practices, strategies to cope with this. Now, a couple of years after the first declaration on cybersecurity, the BRICS members with the Xiamen Declaration included also a commitment to work towards data protection. And that is very interesting because actually leads us to understand that there is a growing preoccupation with data protection and cybersecurity because of the strategic value of data, right? Of course, we all know very well that some of the BRICS members do not have stellar track records in terms of human rights protection, but all understand very well the strategic value of digital technologies and particularly of data as a resource. And some of them, like China or India, they have population of 1.5 billion people. So if personal data are produced by people, then you are sitting on a gold mine. And if you let others exploiting it and you do not reap the benefit of it, it's not the wisest solution as a country, right? That is what motivated us, together with Min, to organize this study that was published only 4 months ago and has been downloaded almost 20,000 times because it is in open access. It's available on the Cambridge University Press website, and here we adopt an agnostic approach to the concept, and we try to track what are the narratives, the policies, the initiatives that the BRICS adopt in terms of digital sovereignty, in terms of the capacity to understand, develop, and regulate digital assets in order to exercise self-determination and control and power over them. And that is where our current debate on data sovereignty stems from. So data sovereignty is a species of the genus digital sovereignty, and it's really about understanding how data-intensive technologies, how they are developed, how can be studied and understood to develop them at the national level and to regulate them so that people, individuals, entire country can keep on exercising their self-determination, their agency. And of course, this is essential to make sure that data protection on the one hand, cybersecurity on the other hand, but also the reaping against the value out of data assets is something possible, and is something possible at the national, domestic level. Now, the question is how to make these national and local choices compatible so that one does not jeopardizes the possibility to trade and to keep on cooperating and innovating. And this is something that we started to analyze also some years ago with our colleague and friend Danilo Duneda, that sadly passed away some years ago. This was one of the last papers he wrote, and we together we were really studying which kind of elements can foster legal interoperability amongst the BRICS countries in order to foster this kind of cooperation, regardless of the need and right to assert one's own sovereignty. And now we have developed this initial reflection in this upcoming book that will be published in September, this book on personal data architectures in the BRICS country. And in this book, we not only map what the BRICS countries are doing, but also we put forward some suggestions on how they could work together. And this is very relevant in light of the very recent commitment of the BRICS countries. This particularly this last, the conclusion of the book. Now it's already available in open access on our website, cyberbrics.info, thanks to the gracious permission of Oxford University Press. And you can read some of the main elements that we are putting forward to try to put forward suggestions for the commitment, the most recent commitment of the BRICS grouping, adopted only 6 months ago at the Kazan meeting, the commitment to build a fair and equitable global framework for data governance, including cross-border data flows, and this to stimulate the interoperability of data policy frameworks. So somehow they sort of copy and paste what we have been suggesting with our research for the past 3 years, and that is actually very good. It's a very good way, I think, to for us to contribute to the ongoing works of the BRICS grouping. The current Brazilian presidency of the BRICS that is shaping the documents that will be adopted in July here in Rio at the BRICS meeting is working tirelessly towards the adoption of a declaration on the data economy and on AI, using a lot of the research that we have been producing. These are some of the elements of the principles that we have suggested. Of course, you recognize here some of the classic data governance principles, the normative one on the left side, but then we have also identified some operational ones. So effective oversight, secure data transfers, privacy by design. So embedding in the design of the technology privacy concern, the promotion of privacy enhancing technologies like digital public infrastructure that the Indian are using, or facilitative regulation, which is what China is very skillfully adopting in terms of industrial policy. So investing a lot in the technology so that you promote it, you don't only regulate it, prohibiting what you don't want, but you also regulate it, facilitating what you want. Also, we put forward in the book, and that is my last slide, a proposal from some model contractual clauses that can facilitate data transfers within the BRICS grouping and with the BRICS Plus grouping. So also other countries that could be interested. And of course, this is something that we deem essential if the BRICS want to build the global data governance framework that are now, at least they seems to be very interested in promoting globally. Thank you very much for your attention.
Muchas gracias, Luca. Una excelente presentación.
Thanks, Luca, for making this presentation that allows us to have a global view of which are the main topics we are addressing in this context. My understanding is that you have also been working, you and Min, you've been working in a book. You're going to be working in a book, Digital Sovereignty. No, sí. Can you now hear me? Okay.
For the brief overview that you had shared with us. It was a very concise and precise description of the global environment and specifically the main issues that are being addressed by BRICS. I would like to ask Min if you can share with us a brief overview and also which are the main issues that you have been working with Luca in your book, if it is possible, of course. And if you would like to go further into some details about the coexistence of the different areas regarding regulatory, legal, and technological infrastructure. So, Min, welcome to the panel, and the floor is yours. Thank you. Creo que ya. Okay.
Can you hear me all right?
All right. Yes, okay. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Jorge, and thank you, Olga, as well as my long-term collaborator, Dr. Luca Velli, for having me on this panel. And greetings to participants in Mexico and perhaps from elsewhere. Following on what Luca's comments, I want to focus on the conceptualizations and challenges of digital sovereignty from the Global South. It's often that we hear from scholars in the Global North who have a tendency to dismiss any autonomy seeking and enhancing digital development, policymaking, and regulation from the Global South as inherently regressive, resembling different forms of digital nationalism and having the potential to fragment the global internet. While such criticisms might find some evidence in, for example, human rights violation practices in some Global South countries and widening digital divide within Global South countries themselves, one also needs to understand, as Luca pointed out, that various claims and practices of digital sovereignty, especially those from the Global South, are also responses to certain status quo that are no longer tenable and productive. My remarks here are largely based on several recent contributions. And one is the book that Luca referred to earlier in his talk, Digital Sovereignty in BRICS Countries. In addition to what Luca has shared, I want to emphasize that this book has a print format at 20% discount before the end of September this year. In addition, it's an open access, free downloadable book in PDF and web formats, and we encourage readers and audiences like yourself to download the book, read it, and also share your comments and feedback with us. And another contribution I made recently on the subject of digital sovereignty is an article I wrote for a special issue on digital sovereignty published by Policy and Internet. In this piece, I focus on comparing different models of digital sovereignty from the Global South countries between specifically China, India, and South Africa. The paper argues that that we need to reconceptualize digital sovereignty, not only in such normative terms such as territorial integrity, legal equality, and non-interference, which is very much related to the normative definition of sovereignty, but also it's important increasingly to recognize the importance of digital capacity, self-sufficiency, and autonomy that emphasize the constitutive power of digital technologies in restructuring and structuring social, economic, and political relationships. A third piece is a new essay just published this past week on AI and algorithm by a DC-based think tank, New America. In this essay, this is a part of a New America series, Who Controls AI? Global Voices on Digital Sovereignty and in an Unequal World. In this piece, I think it's important, given artificial intelligence concerns algorithm, concerns data, infrastructure, and which now lies at the frontier of internet governance and digital governance. I think it's important to also integrate the conversation about artificial intelligence in my remarks about digital sovereignty. As I mentioned previously, the different forms of claims to and practices of digital sovereignty are responses to certain status quo perceived to be sovereignty violating, following what Snowden revealed in 2013. We know now that at the time NSA was spying on global population, internet population, including eavesdropping on German Chancellor Angela Merkel and Brazilian President Dilma Rousseff's personal phones. And after that announcement, and we know that Brazil quickly developed the idea of building Link, an undersea cable connecting Brazil directly to Portugal, and by proxy, South America to Europe to circumvent US surveillance and enhance its digital sovereignty. So a certain global consensus that existed for a very long time for the rest of the world to adopt US technologies, including hardware and software, without any regard for cybersecurity, safety, and independence, that consensus was decidedly broken at that moment. In an interesting twist, European Union, also adopted the policy of digital sovereignty. Here, we have a group of states, not a single state, banding together to trying to counterbalance and stake out different positions from the United States cyber-libertarian and neoliberal approach, and what EU perceives to be a more authoritarian Chinese approach. In the words of former Chancellor Angela Merkel, who gave a speech at the 2019 IGF, and quote, she said, "As I understand it, digital sovereignty does not mean protectionism or that state authorities say what information can be disseminated, censorship in other words. Rather, it describes the ability both of individuals and of society to shape digital transformation in a self-determined way," unquote. So in our book, we call this perspective supranational digital sovereignty to differentiate it from claims of digital sovereignty made by a single state. EU's approach is very interesting as it is a claim and a strategy adopted by a group of states, not a single state, which collectively realize that acting together, speaking in one voice, gives it a certain power in digital policy making on the global stage. This approach has very interesting implications for us, for a lot of global South countries, as we see more and more regional blocs, such as the BRICS, as mentioned before by Luca, also including the African Digital Compact backed by the African Union. They're offering really interesting collective responses from the global South to global digital dominance by the United States. So it's a very interesting way to rethink sovereignty as not being, independent on your own, but be independent and cooperative together. In our book, we adopted a very generative definition of digital sovereignty as the exercise of agency, power, and control in shaping digital infrastructure, data, services, and protocols. Our book project did not impose a certain state-centric definition of digital sovereignty, as we recognize it is understood around the world and by different practitioners to mean different things. Instead, our contributors, in a very bottom-up effort, shared how digital sovereignty can be understood in various distinct ways that do not always share a unified definition. In our book, we also offered a large framework of digital sovereignty that maps out 7 perspectives. Instead of explaining each of the perspectives one by one, I would encourage the audience to read our book to get a more detailed description and in-depth understanding. We already mentioned state digital sovereignty and supranational digital sovereignty to some extent, given this is a global South focused and South School conference. Allow me to say a few words about post-colonial digital sovereignty that is relevant to the audience here. Post-colonial digital sovereignty, we think, recognizes indigenous communities have used sovereignty in the context of data sovereignty and network sovereignty for a long time to promote autonomy and self-determination as a form of post-colonial critique. The goal was not or has not been state-driven at all, but rather to resist digital dispossessions that mirror land dispossessions during the colonial era, where European powers use sovereignty as a legal instrument to take ownership of supposedly unowned lands. Digital terra nullius and data colonialism are precisely the target of criticism of the perspective we call post-colonial digital sovereignty. Post-colonial digital sovereignty is not only an anti-colonial, anti-imperial assertion, but also responds to the dominance of tech giants, mostly American players, but also increasingly Chinese ones, in driving digital economies, shaping digital norms, and wielding immense power, often more than small states. Amazon, Facebook, Google, even Twitter under Elon Musk are prime examples. However, unlike the Chinese counterparts that are more closely regulated by the state, big Silicon Valley firms often exercise a form of quasi-normative, quasi-executive, and quasi-judicial power with little accountability, either in taxation or content moderation. We call this form of digital sovereignty corporate digital sovereignty. It is worthwhile to ask, we believe in this era, who are the digital sovereigns and who are the digital subjects today? This resembles sort of a power imbalance, for decades ago. In the 1970s, the world had a momentous debate called the World Information and Communication Order Debate, New WICO debate, that culminated in the McBride Report published by UNESCO in 1980. At the time, information sovereignty and cultural sovereignty, these were the exact phrases from the report, were of great concern to global South countries, which were critical of the free flow of information agenda championed by the US and UK. As a matter of fact, US and UK left the debate claiming that global South countries have no grounds for this kind of debate because they champion free flow of information. Today, history seems to not repeat itself, but rhymes most definitely. Earlier this year, in the Paris AI Summit, again, US and UK refused to sign the Paris AI Action Summit statement, while other countries are committed to developing, quote, open, inclusive, ethical AI. More shockingly, perhaps not so shocking, perhaps given how things are folding in the United States, in President Trump's One Big Beautiful tax bill unveiled last week, House Republicans in the United States are trying to stop individual states in the United States from regulating AI, which immediately provoked pushback from more than 100 organizations. As the current administration has adopted an America First policy, which invariably would mean America alone, whether it is in trade or tech policy, the world is increasingly moving in a decidedly multipolar direction where the global South and global South countries will play a more important role. To wrap up, in fact, earlier this month, finance ministers and central bank chiefs from Japan, China, South Korea, and ASEAN member countries issued a joint statement as an indirect warning to President Trump. They are trying to reaffirm their commitment to free trade and also objected to U.S. protectionism unilaterally. So for us, for me, the post-West multipolar moment has arrived, accelerated by President Trump's tariffs that have clearly backfired. A brief example, in a similar way, US chip sanctions on China have already backfired. Not only did Chinese tech communities in the last few years develop DeepSeek in an open source AI application, despite constraints, Chinese tech giant Huawei has also recently developed chips, including Ascent 920, to replace NVIDIA's high-end chips as well. So as you can see, it is important to note that at a macroeconomic level, for instance, the combined GDP of the BRICS countries at purchasing power parity has already surpassed that of G7 countries since 2020, since the pandemic. So in the digital arena, BRICS countries, as Luca has already alluded to, have a wide range of conceptualizations, practices, and policy making that are really interesting and worth digging into. I won't go into details, a lot of which is very well documented in our open source book, but I want to emphasize that digital sovereignty means to each country on this list or to many other countries and citizens different things with different ideas of human rights, data protection, as well as digital capacities and digital policy making. To conclude, it is also important to keep in mind that under the giant tent of the Global South, there are the Power South as well as the Pool South. It can be argued that more powerful members of the Global South, such as the BRICS countries, given their global influence and ambitions, may not always recognize the challenges of small nations or represent their interests. However, what is important to recognize is that the world is clearly changing, the likes of which we probably haven't seen during our lifetime. And in this new world, Global South countries are going to play a more and more important role. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this interesting presentation. It was very powerful. All these incomes that are being taking place at a global level. And now I would like to introduce Alfredo's presentation in order to see what is happening within the Latin American context, what is happening regarding the regulation of artificial intelligence, and what is happening in the arena of the digital sovereignty. So, Alfredo, thank you very much, and the floor is yours. Bienvenido, amigo.
Gracias de verdad, Jorge. Un gusto.
Thanks. It is my pleasure to be here with you. Thanks, Olga, Adrian. It is an honor. It is an honor to be in this South School of Internet Governance. Congratulations, and it is my pleasure to be with you all. I am also very express my gratitude for sharing this place with people such as Cynthia, Luca, Dr. Min. Let's start. I only would like to confirm with you that you conveniently see the presentation. As Jorge said, what is the influence of the new international regulations and the regulation of artificial intelligence of the European Union in the development of data regulatory frameworks in Latin America? These international regulations, such as the regulation we were mentioning before, are having an indirect but meaningful impact in Latin America, specifically in how the countries in the region are starting to design regulatory frameworks for data, for artificial intelligence, and for the digital government. This regulation of artificial intelligence of the European Union establishes a risk-based approach, and it is promoting very specific principles such as transparency, traceability, human supervision, and respect of fundamental rights. This has produced a regulatory effect that is going beyond. We have the Brussels effect, where this regulation is giving a rise to international standards, and many Latin American countries are observing this standard, and they are aligned to globally accepted standards because of technological cooperation. And countries such as Brazil, Mexico, Chile, Colombia, it has similar principles: ethics, transparency, mitigation of biases in the regulatory proposals, and guidance and artificial intelligence strategies. There is international cooperation on multilateral entities, like the ones we have mentioned: CEPAL, Inter-American Development Bank, and the OECD is working in order to work with frameworks and the law, the artificial intelligence law. And the standard, this regulation speaks about levels of risk, minimum risk, video games, spam filters, limited risk, such as chatbots, high risk use in transport, marketing schemes, credits, recruitment of staff members, and unacceptable risk when it is making reference to biometrics, management in the social media, to how to manage identity in the social media. This regulation its aim is to guarantee artificial intelligence. It doesn't want to limit the possibility of using AI. The idea is to impose obligations to vendors and those responsible for deploying AI technologies, to look for a certain control. And with Cynthia, we're going to see if the control is actually happening or not. Here we have artificial intelligence, such as biases and loopholes in accountability. And we have the adoption of AI, promoting a safe AI adoption or with less risk. This is the first legal standard in the world to regulate artificial intelligence, and these provisions can become a reference point internationally, speaking about a regulation of artificial intelligence, speaking about data privacy, and it can promote an ethic, safe, and reliable AI all over the world. This regulation proposes an interesting governance in structure with several government entities and Office of Artificial Intelligence in the European Commission, and this is to guarantee compliance of common standards. A group of experts and scientists, independent, that are trying to support the compliance. An AI committee composed by representatives of all the state members to give advice and to assist the committee and the member states to efficiently apply the regulation, and a consultative forum so that the interested stakeholders give technical knowledge to the committee and to the commission. All this is to give a continuity solution and not to make it static. It should grow as it develops, as the use of this AI grows. The regulation establishes fines, very important sanctions, and a percentage of the total business volume of the company in the previous year, or a specific amount if it is more than the previous one. Obviously, there are discounts for SMEs and for emerging companies because at the end of the day, what they want in case they face some of these sanctions, they have proportional fines. Now let's see the progress that exists in the implementation of intelligent data governance and sovereignty. And here we're going to be speaking about national frameworks and strategies. There are many representatives of all these countries here, and I will not be making a complete listing, but the example could be Uruguay, that is becoming a regional leader in digital government. It has a national artificial intelligence strategy since 2019 and an electronic government that is doing data protection. Brazil, as others have said, the Brazilian strategy for artificial intelligence, it started in 2021 and it has ethics, regulation, innovation, and inclusion. There is a legal framework of data, personal data protection, and it has been implemented since 2020. Chile, the national strategy for artificial intelligence since 2021, and progressive use of data analytics in public services. We also have government interoperability through platforms such as the digital. Colombia it adopted the digital government policy and it is doing data governance through the administrative public function and administration department. We should not forget about other Latin American countries, but I would like to say that in Mexico, in a provision, in some provisions, speaking about data protection, the new federal data protection law in possession of individuals. It was just published last month. It contains interesting definitions. For example, if we speak about how data are treated, it is defined as any transaction or set of transactions performed manually or in an automated way applied to personal data related to obtain, use, register, record, preserve, use, communicate, diffuse, store, assign, transfer, or availability of information. It is a very, very big, but making reference to automation models, and this is how Article 26 that shows what was seen in a regulation in a different way to now see it in a more objective way. The data holder will always have the right legally to oppose to how his her data are being treated or to ask the stop of or ask to stop the treatment as long as there is a legal cause. But what is interesting is when we see if personal data are being subject to automated treatment that will have undesired legal consequences, or if it significantly affects interests, rights, and freedoms, and if it is used to assess without human intervention some personal aspects of the person and to analyze and to predict what is the professional performance, economic situation, health status, preference, sexual preference, reliability, and behavior. There is a very interesting exception to this when the treatment is necessary to enforce a legal action. But look, we're speaking about automated treatment without a human intervention. So there is a specific provision today that is making reference to what we could say is AI. And now, with respect to data infrastructure and interoperability, national interoperability platforms have been developed, and it allows public institutions to efficiently and safely share data, and the use of open finance is making progress. Open banking and visualization tools affordable, accessible to citizens. There is progress being made, and there is more to do, at least in the financial setting, to be regulated in Mexico. But now we are looking at that. Several initiatives, mainly in Brazil, Uruguay, and Chile, include ethical frameworks and guidance to develop transparent algorithm, but many of those are not legally binding yet. We discuss the need for algorithmic ethics committee, and Cynthia, she's going to be speaking about more than 50 initiatives in Mexico that make a specific reference to AI. And last but not least, we have the ethics side, because this is what we said before. And despite of the fact Latin America doesn't yet have a specific regulation for AI like the European Union, the new international regulations, technical influence at the regional level, data governance and digital government, and making progress with more sophisticated strategic frameworks. Despite of the fact there are important challenges, speaking about resources, technical capacities, and interinstitutional coordination. Thanks so much for the opportunity to address you. And now we will give the floor to Cynthia. Thanks so much, dear Alfredo, for this presentation. It is always a pleasure to share these spaces with our friends from the South School of Internet Governance. And in order to start, Cynthia, it is nice to see you, to salute you, friend. Can you hear us? No, 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 we don't hear you. No, 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 they don't hear us. Yes, now they can hear us. Welcome, dear Cynthia. We're very happy to have you here. We have 6 minutes, 7 minutes, Olga says, to see the legal situation of Mexico, digital sovereignty, and artificial intelligence. Would you please share with us, Cynthia, according to your experience, all these topics which are being addressed here through different instruments and regulatory instruments, and we appreciate your presentation. Yes, can you see my presentation? Yes? Well, in order to make some time adjustments, and it is a topic that, as you can tell, it is my passion, and I would like to thank Olga and Adrian for this invitation, because they are part of my family. I am part of the family. I was a student at the SSIG, and it's been like a family to me. Now I have many contacts, and I know people, very valuable people, such as Dr. Min, Luca, thousands of people, lots of people. I have a bigger presentation, but I will make it shorter. I will start with a provoking question to know if we can guarantee an effective data governance. Why am I saying this? Because even with models, everything can be more perfect. But let's think we have a regulatory or ideal governance model, or for example, now that we're speaking about the regulatory framework of artificial intelligence, lawyers always have this trend, and I believe this is a deformation of our as a school. Each time we have a problem, I know when things we know are not is not useful, we tend to regulate, and the regulation will not be useful. Regulation looks nice in paper, but it is not consistent with technological development. So my question is, data governance models would allow us to control that information used to train artificial intelligence models, I was speaking about the different models and of governance, but I will now directly speak about Mexico. Dr. Min, they have spoken about these regulatory models, and Alfredo, the international trends. Let's speak about where Mexico is going to. No governance model is going to be bad. They have the advantages and disadvantages, but how it is implemented, and for this I will be speaking about the regulations. And for example, if we review each one of those separately, uh, it will not be a big uncertainty, but if we see the global overview of where Mexico is going to, I believe it can be very uncertain. There is a project, Java MX, for those who know the story of the data protection regulations during the 70s. Think about the computing capacity of the 70s. It has nothing to do with today. And in France, there was a project, and the name was Safari, but it was never implemented. It was an information centralization model for French citizens. But then we saw the regulation that is used today, speaking about the personal data protection and the creation of the control authority, the national committee information, and that is a reality in Mexico. In France, it was never implemented, but now we have it in Mexico. It is Java MX. This is a replica of a big scale project made in Mexico City in the previous administration. It is a centralized model where you're going to see data of as all citizens in Mexico to streamline processes. Something very important is that here we have the Federal Republic model, the powers of the states, the objective reality of each state. Transactions and procedures are very different. In Mexico City, for example, we will not have an agrarian registry or cattle registry, things that can be found in other places. Something very important, it isolates vulnerable population, indigenous children, people with disabilities, elderly people, regardless of the fact that today in Mexico, despite of the big progress we are doing in connectivity, there are groups of people that do not even have access to electricity or actual technological things like the power outage. You're going to be with no power, and you rely on electronic systems. The new law of personal data protection, where everything is ambiguous, and in these conditions, all citizens can be regulated entities, and we lost in an independent authority, and now we work with an authority that reports to the executive. We also have the telecommunications law. We decided not to have a fifth generation regulator, which is the highest level recognized by the International Union of Telecommunications, to have another model with an authority that has many, many powers, and it is the same one managing Java MX, and it will play both roles. Supposedly, it is going to be eliminated, but it is included in Article 109, where the platforms can be suspended. Information platforms can be suspended if they violate the legislation. And we also have anti competitive conditions and unequal conditions. We also have a general law, legislative bill for the public security system, where there is going to be a registry of cell phone users, including biometrics, and all the public security authorities in the country will have an access account without the need for judicial control. This is very serious, and we also see how other states and municipalities, like in the case of Ecatepec, implemented a C7, which is an AI model, being imported from the Pentagon. It is an American model, and it is replicating models, and it has been seen that they violate human rights, and this is to predict the crime incidents evidence. We are violating a fundamental rights, the right of presumption of innocence. And then we have the regulation of risk dispersed. There are more than 50 legislative bills in Mexico, and somehow they show the lack of knowledge of AI, the risks, and the usefulness. We have models and that do not understand. And here we have an Article 239 of one of the initiatives. Basically, if you make a pancake, a deformed pancake in microwave, it is going to be treated as an AI work. This is the size of ignorance. And obviously, there are other articles that somehow have a punitive view of the use of technologies, and if we complement this with this government control, and if we have the federal judicial branch, where it seems that there is no division of branches in Mexico, what will happen? We will have important risks. Speaking about human rights, summarizing the model Mexico is going to implement, it's a very dangerous model where instead of making progress towards innovation and protection of human rights, we're speaking about governmental control. And I will end with this phrase of Article 1, and it reads, informatics should serve citizens, and the development should be for international cooperation, and it should never damage or represent a threat against human identity, rights of people, or individual or public rights. So this is a help flag, because Mexico is going to have this type of governmental control very dangerously. Thanks, Cynthia, and it is always a pleasure to listen to you. It is a pleasure. And it is a pleasure to be with you. Gianluca left the session, and thanks so much. And because of time reasons, we need to go to our next presenter. We will not have the questions now. And I would like to express my gratitude again, and greetings. I hope to see you soon. También muchas.
Time for questions. If we have questions, we will send them to you. Very, very interesting. And regards from Mexico, beautiful Mexico. See you somewhere in the world. Ciao.
Chao. Bye bye.